as never before, a range of water-based products which produce the same breathtaking effects once only available in oils. Paint effects such as rag rolling, colour washing, graining and marbling are all now possible for the first time using a water-based system. Polyvine has created a range of environmentally friendly products which are simple to use, yet stunning in their application. In the past, the secrets of the grainer and marbler have been shrouded in mystery. Tools and techniques were jealously guarded secrets, passed down from master decorator to pupil. Unusual ingredients, such as vinegar, stale beer, rabbit skin, or bone glue, were commonly used to achieve decorative paint effects. The most important ingredient of all was the glaze. Traditionally, the glaze was an oil medium such as linseed oil, coloured with an oil paint and thinned with turpentine. It has a translucency that can be built up to give a feeling of depth. The glaze stays open for a long time, which means that the artist has enough time to produce the texture and pattern required before the glaze dries. This private chapel at a manor house in Somerset was completely wood-grained over 100 years ago, using oil-based paints and glazes. Over the years, the graining became damaged and the colours faded with age. In order to match the Victorian graining, water-based glazes were preferred. These panels were regrained using water-based glaze and varnish from Polyvine. The colours and techniques were matched so closely that the new graining is indistinguishable from the original Victorian panels. The Polyvine system is a fully compatible range of water-based products derived from acrylic polymer technology. The key to broken colourwork is the glaze. Polyvine produces two, classic colour and acrylic scumble, that retard the quick drying quality of acrylic, producing long open times. Crackle products faithfully reproduce the popular antiqued look of paints and varnishes. Add to this the ever-increasing range of products that allow you to create special effects. And finish off all your work with compatible, non-yellowing varnishes.
And you'll find you get nice little tippy marks down the grain. Okay?
Can you follow the grain?
Yeah.
At Polyvine's headquarters in South Gloucestershire, Keith Warwick trains contractors and applicators in the use of water-based decorative finishes.
I've had about 20 years of experience in oils and never thought the day would arrive when I could produce all the marble effects and wood graining in water-based products. Since Polyvine's come out, I can now achieve all these finishes to perfection, exactly the same as I could do with oil-based paint. That's it. Always come down at 90 degrees to the work, so it's nice little peaks of
Polyvine is continually introducing new products to meet the needs of the decorative painter. Let's start with the glazes, classic colour and acrylic scumble. Both glazes should be applied over a smooth, non-absorbent surface. This demonstration wall has been painted with a vinyl silk emulsion. You could also use an acrylic eggshell. Various tools can be used to manipulate the glazes and introduce texture. They won't cost a fortune. You can use a paper or plastic bag for bagging, a cloth for ragging, even a crumpled newspaper for frotting, and a natural sponge. Polyvine produces a range of brushes for stippling, flogging, softening, and rubbing in. Keep the brush moist while in use and do not allow acrylics to dry on the bristles. After use, wash brushes well with mild soap and water. Classic colour is a milky white and gel-like liquid. It is coloured with emulsion paint, any vinyl matte or silk emulsion. This means that you can choose from hundreds of different ready-mixed colours. The dried effect will be the same as the dried emulsion would have been on its own, essential for matching an existing colour scheme. It will be semi-opaque, allowing the base colour to show through where the surface of the glaze has been broken. The classic colour gives the emulsion paint the working time you need for your effects. Otherwise, it would dry too quickly and would not retain the texture. You need to mix classic colour to emulsion in the ratio 6:1. Differences in temperature affect the open time, so make allowances for this when you mix your glaze. If it is cold or damp, or the working area is relatively small, the amount of classic colour should be reduced to 4:1. If it is hot and dry, increase the amount to extend the open time. The classic colour and emulsion mixture, or glaze, is applied to the wall in a workable area. 2 metres by 1 metre is reasonable. The glaze must be applied evenly and generously. For any technique, if you do not want the brush strokes to remain, it is necessary to stipple them out. This is done using a flat-headed brush, striking the glaze quite hard at right angles in successive rapid movements. The finish is soft and even. Stippling can also be used as an effect on its own. This first technique is rag rolling. Take a damp cloth, wring it out well, and roll it up quite loosely. It may help to twist it round a little. Hold the cloth in your fingertips and roll it on the surface of the glaze. Work in every direction, leaving a pattern where the cloth has removed the glaze. As the cloth becomes covered with the glaze, re-roll it until it becomes saturated and you need to replace it with another piece. Make sure that the new piece is the same fabric, or the mark it makes will be different. If working a large area, you will find it easier if 2 people work together. One to brush on the glaze, the other to apply the texture. This technique of removing the glaze and leaving a pattern is similar for other simple, popular finishes. The pattern is made by the texture of the material and the way in which the glaze is removed from the surface. Alternatively, the glaze can be applied to the base coat straight from a dampened natural sponge. A synthetic sponge tends to give too hard an edge for this method. Test the sponge on a board to check the colour and ensure that there is not too much glaze on the sponge. Several layers of colour can be built up using this method. The choice of colour will make the effect more or less dramatic. Always add the darkest colour last, building up the density gradually. Another very popular finish is achieved by colour washing. This technique is particularly effective for covering irregularities in walls. Classic colour and emulsion is mixed as before. The glaze is brushed on generously and randomly. Then it can be spread out using a variety of tools, such as a large brush, a cloth, or a car wash glove, as Keith demonstrates here. The marks can remain in the glaze, a sort of fingerprint. The classic colour will allow the glaze to dry like this, whereas emulsion on its own would flatten out the texture. Colour wash is particularly effective when layers of colour are built up one on top of the other. When the first coat is dry, the time this takes depends on the weather, coat the wall with satin varnish. This creates a feeling of depth and gives a better surface for the next coat. This stage should be repeated between any subsequent colours. When the varnish is completely dry, you can brush on the second coloured glaze. As with sponging on, progress from light to darker colours. As the second coat is spread, it creates a three-tone effect as the base and first glaze colours show through where the surface is broken. Colours should be related in some way, either different tones of the same colour or similar tones of related colours. Another very quick and effective method is frottage. Mix classic colour and emulsion paint in the ratio 4:1. This method works well with dark colours as the broken colour texture is bold. Here the base coat is deep red and the glaze is a strong red-brown. Brush on the glaze. Crumple up a sheet of newspaper. Open it out and lay it flat on the surface of the glaze. Lining paper on a roll can also be used for large areas. 2 people are definitely needed for this. Smooth lightly over the surface, but not enough to completely flatten all the creases. Slowly peel back the paper to reveal the effect. You can complete the effect by patching in any areas that require texturing further with a small piece of paper. Classic colour is ideal for use on walls, including kitchens and bathrooms. It can also be used on furniture, fitted units and woodwork when protected with varnish. Here, the glaze is mixed 4:1 with a blue matte emulsion and applied all over. This small door is now ready for a variety of techniques to give different textures, but in the same colour. The door is stippled using a 4" by 1" stippling brush to smooth out the brush strokes, and also for the effect itself on the raised moulding. Dragging the outer edge introduces another texture. A special brush is not necessary for this. Keep the bristles free of glaze by wiping them occasionally on a cloth. The top and bottom edges are dragged first, then the sides. Draw the bristles lightly through the surface of the glaze. The inside could be ragged. The cloth is crumpled quite small and will give a tight texture. The context of the piece should be considered when choosing the surface pattern. Make sure that the corners and edges are also ragged. Classic colour finishes should always be varnished with Polyvine Decorator's acrylic varnish. Annie Sloan, the decorative painter and author of the Practical Guide to Decorative Antique Effects, has been discovering the creative possibilities that classic colour offers. Drawing on 20 years of experience and of fine art training, Annie exploits the colour and textural potential of the medium. This small table has been prepared and base-coated in a cream emulsion from Annie Sloan's own range of water-based paints. A glaze of classic colour and green emulsion is brushed on and ragged. When this coat is dry, it is varnished in preparation for a second glaze. Polyvine water-based varnishes are milky when wet, but dry clear. When the varnish is completely dry, Annie mixes a glaze of classic colour and deep red emulsion and brushes it onto the surface. Using a wide-toothed decorator's comb, she pulls it through the glaze. These combs come with different tooth widths. They can also be easily made from a thick piece of cardboard.
I use water-based paints because it's very quick drying. That's the whole point about it. Years ago you'd have to paint something, wait for a day for it to dry, and now I don't have that. I can paint immediately, leave it to dry. Sometimes I even use a hairdryer to quickly get on with it, and then I can put a first coat on, I can do a second coat, third coat, I experiment, try lots of different things and different techniques together. So I've got this one here where I did a blue background and then I've done a black sponge over it. I could use that and now do something else on it. I could do some dragging on it or whatever. Keep changing it. The whole thing about these effects is they're very, very simple. I mean, dragging, sponging, whatever, they're all simple. They're not difficult at all. What is important is learning about colour. So there I've got a pale green background and a darker green over it. Now, you know, I could maybe put another colour over that. And then over here I've got some sponges. There's again that strong contrasty colours. They're very similar sort of colours, sort of stony colours, rather heathery things, quite similar in tone. And then here I've got a lot of combed ones. I particularly like combing because I can let that dry and do another coat over it in a different direction. I like that a lot. Those are rather a bit psychedelic, that one, where it's very red and blue. They sort of jump about the colours. Then there's this one here, and those ones. They're two greens, where I think that one's quite a formal looking one, whereas that one is got the bright green background and a slightly sombre, sort of browny red. Quite different in feel to them. I mean, one could be used in quite a formal room, whereas the other one I think probably be quite fun. So these techniques are so easy, and yet you can play about with the colour and get all sorts of different things. And so that's what I enjoy about the water-based paints.
Transparent acrylic scumble glaze can be used for these simple techniques, but it is also the product for more complicated finishes, such as marbling. One of the main differences between acrylic scumble glaze and classic colour is that scumble is coloured with Polyvine colorizers. This produces a translucent effect reminiscent of oil glazes. To demonstrate how to mix colorizers, we have chosen 4 colours from the range: burnt sienna, yellow oxide, ultramarine and white. Adding a few drops of yellow oxide to ultramarine gives an olive green. Burnt sienna and yellow oxide give a dark orange. Adding burnt sienna to ultramarine produces a rich wine red. These colours are possibly darker than you will use for your broken colour work. If you add a drop of white, this will lighten the colour. If you want them to be even lighter, add a few more drops and you have a pastel shade. With all these colours to choose from, you have an almost infinite range at your disposal. The amount of colorizer that you mix with Polyvine scumble will depend on the strength of colour required. As a guide, add 10 drops of colorizer to 5 teaspoons of scumble. Some colorizers are based on wood colours. Here, dark oak is mixed with the scumble. This dado has an embossed wall covering. This can be antiqued using a scumble glaze. The wall covering has been sealed using an off-white vinyl silk emulsion and allowed to cure fully. The glaze is brushed on quite thickly and care taken to cover all the surface. Any mistakes can be quite easily wiped off, one of the advantages of water-based glazes. Remove the excess glaze with a damp cloth. The translucency of the scumble glaze allows the colour of the base to show through. It dries with a sheen. Above the dado, a glaze of acrylic scumble and blue colorizer is applied for a bagged effect. The base coat is a vinyl silk emulsion. brush strokes are stippled out to give an even finish. Here, a plastic bag is being used to break the surface and introduce a texture. Different bags will give a harder or softer edge, depending on the type of plastic. Paper bags can be used just as well. To finish the wall, the chair rail and skirting board can also be glazed. The same dark oak coloured glaze is applied to the rail and is dragged using any brush. Then, using a Polyvine flogger, distress the surface by tapping gently. This is the foundation to simple graining. In Canada, Whitting's Studio has pioneered the use of Polyvine products. Their recent broken colour work at the Pillar and Post Hotel at Niagara-on-the-Lake is refreshingly experimental. They also held a redecoration workshop at the opulent Casa Loma in Toronto. Crackle effects are very popular and have been notoriously difficult to achieve using traditional materials. Now there are 3 Polyvine products that give an aged look to a new paint or varnished finish. Crackle glaze is applied between 2 layers of matte emulsion paint and causes the top coat to crack. This little box has a base coat of blue matte emulsion. This is the colour that will appear through the cracks. The glaze should be applied using a good quality brush to avoid brush marks. Now leave this to dry before the second coat. When it is dry, paint the top coat of paint in a contrasting colour. Again, a matte emulsion, not a non-drip variety. The paint should be a single cream consistency. Add a little water if necessary. Apply the paint in one stroke in a different direction to the glaze. You can see that the yellow coat on the box has already started to crack to reveal the base coat. The speed of cracking will depend on the temperature and the thickness of the top coat. To speed up the cracking, you can use a hairdryer on a medium setting. Be very careful and don't hold it too close. Crackle glaze can produce really dramatic effects between colours. To achieve an authentic aged paint look on large pieces, use it randomly. Crackle glaze is also used with crackle varnish to produce an aged varnish effect. The glaze and varnish should be mixed well in the ratio 1:1. To the work, which might be a piece of furniture or a picture frame that has already been decorated with a paint effect or stencil. Apply a coat of the crackle glaze and varnish mix. If the base coat is absorbent, apply 2 coats of the mixture. Then leave it to dry overnight. Next, apply the crackle varnish on its own in the opposite direction to the base coat. The underneath coat causes the varnish to produce coarse random cracks as it dries. Use it where you require a distressed effect. It is hard to see the effect at this stage as the varnish dries clear and it takes about an hour to dry completely. To highlight the cracks, work in a mixture of Polyvine scumble and a dark colorizer, such as burnt umber. Then take a dry cloth and wipe off the excess, leaving the color in the cracks. Work a small area at a time. Crackle varnish is effective on all manner of objects that you require to show the patina of age. The third crackle product is called craquelure. It is a 2-part system which reproduces the regular cracking of old porcelain glaze. It is most effective on pictures and small items. If you have been put off by the difficulties of using the oil-based version of this effect, then try this product. It is so easy and effective. You apply it in 2 parts. The bottles are clearly marked base coat and top coat. Pour out a little from the bottle marked base coat and apply it to the prepared item. The base coat is milky when wet and dries clear. It should be brushed out evenly. Soften out any marks with a Polyvine Master Softener. Note that this coating is still tacky when dry. Wash the brush immediately after use. Brush on the top coat and soften the brush marks as before. As it dries, you will see small cracks appearing. These are finer and more regular than the previous crackle glaze and crackle varnish system. Show up the cracks in the same way, using a mixture of Polyvine scumble glaze and colorizer that contrasts with the background. This drawer fits into a shelf that has itself been painted using crackle glaze between a warm, rich red emulsion and a darker shade of the same colour. Craquelure is ideal for aging small items and details on larger ones. Frosting varnish, finishing gold and size are other Polyvine products that we find exciting and new uses for every day. Frosting varnish is a wonderful acrylic medium which has been developed to faithfully reproduce the unique visual effect of etched glass. The frosting varnish can be applied through a stencil. Make sure that the stencil is securely fixed to the glass so that it does not move. Frosting varnish can be used on vertical or horizontal surfaces. Pour out a little frosting varnish into a roller tray and charge the roller. Then apply the frosting varnish. Keith is using a sponge roller to apply the coat thinly. Several thin coats can be applied to build up the texture. Notice he uses a smaller roller with a finer texture. When you've finished applying the frosting varnish, you can then carefully remove the stencil. Make sure you do so before it is completely dry. Polyvine frosting varnish has been used on display cases at the Natural History Museum in London. The fossil motifs on the windows continue the theme of the cabinet's contents. These items have been gilded, highlighted or patinated using the range of Polyvine finishing metals. These non-metallic finishes reproduce the appearance of metals: gold, pewter, copper, bronze and silver. Satin varnish or vinyl silk emulsion must be used to base coat items made of plaster. This seals the surface so that it will accept the finishing metal. The varnish can be mixed with a colorizer. The choice of base color will give a slight tint to the finishing metal. Allow the base coat to dry. Bright finishing gold is being poured here and applied to this smaller plaque. It is preferable to give 2 light coats rather than 1 thick one. This second plaque is being coated in antique gold. When the coat is dry, the finish can be burnished with a cloth. This gives a shine to the surface. The process is the same for the small coloured head, which is being coated in finishing pewter. Polyvine produces water-based acrylic decorators varnishes to protect decorative paintwork and wallpapers. Polyvine varnishes don't yellow with age. There is a choice of 3 finishes: dead flat, the most popular for decorative artists, satin, and gloss. Varnishing wax is a unique brushable coating that has the silky feel and appearance of traditional beeswax, but is water and heat resistant. Classic Paint Effects gives emulsion paint a traditional waxy feel and appearance. It has been mixed with a red emulsion paint and used to base coat this elegant table. Here, Keith is applying a second coat of Classic Paint Effects and cream emulsion. When the top coat is dry, it can be distressed with fine sandpaper to show the underneath colour, an effective method of 2-colour aging. Further burnishing with a dry, coarse cloth or steel wool will give a polished, worn appearance. This cabinet shows a top coat of Classic Paint Effects mixed with green emulsion, burnished back to reveal the red base coat. The complete range of Polyvine products, constantly growing to meet the demands of innovative and traditional decorative artists.